a Happy Cloud AudioToon.
A man getting bit by an alligator and he screams.
Ow! No, not an owl. The first one you did up here was much better.
Streets of Laredo.
It's that time again for the Further Adventures of Rune, Return of the Miggins, brought to you by Happy Cloud Media and Chrome Toothpaste. Chapter 6, Baba Yaga's Chicken and Chips. There's a bonus in it if you assign right now. How big a bonus? The bonus wasn't that impressive. Not sure I understand the tactic in delaying, Chief, said Dusty. He speared a bit of chicken on the tines of his fork and made for his open mouth, but the restaurant lurched sideways quite unexpectedly, and the greasy morsel wound up in his left ear. Always make 'em wait, said Rune, grasping his chips for dear life. If they're still around tomorrow, we'll know they're serious. Baba Yaga's Chicken and Chips was Rune's favorite restaurant. The food was massively unhealthy and thus most delicious. Everything was fried, including the coffee. The interior was designed in the neoclassic rustic third world hut style, with walls of rough-hewn wood, roofs of gathered thatch. The booths, of course, were vinyl. The crone, Baba Yaga's blood-curdling mascot, was prominent on the menus, and a happy life-size cutout of her near the register, gnarled hands with long nails, fingers beckoning to the young ones to try it kids menu. As consumer or entree, the crone was unclear. The building lurched again, to the right this time. Baba Yaga's also boasted ever-changing scenery due to the restaurant's habit of randomly rising upon their massive poultry legs and wandering off on their own. Patrons would slide this way and that as the structures lumbered along. Ordering the soup was ill-advised. A quick aside regarding food and transport. A curious aspect of casual travel on Trogdine has to do with the relationship between non-speaking animals and animorphs, as the talking, non-human but often bipedal species are often categorized. Thousands of fleens in the past, or so it's said, the animorphs and the animals came to an accord. Some species, like galoots and lummoxes, were fine being beasts of burden. Walking is walking and could is could, it was said to be the philosophy, but they were not to be eaten. Afterwards, any mention of 2 legs bad, 4 legs good was met with the rude gestures the racism deserved. Accords set, the animorphs and humanish turned to the wizardy sections to find alternatives to food. Thus, shmoos were introduced to the worldwide diet. Produced by alchemical labs and thenceforth bred naturally, shmoos are, more or less, sentient lumps of tofu or similar meat-flavored flora. All shmoos are born with an innate sense of the absurdity of the universe, and are thus happy to be killed and devoured as quickly as possible. Fricasseed, fried, basted, roasted, it was all the same to a shmoo, so long as the end was swift. No matter how prepared, they often tasted like chicken. Chickens, on the other hand, are inherently evil beings, and no such morality is placed upon them. Hence, Baba Yaga's. Thus, on Trogdine, you could travel by technology, hope for an Eastern-born aeroship, or hop upon a lumbering lummox, or a galloping galoot. If you were hungry, there was chicken, or the flavor cavalcade that is shmoo. This is the handshake upon which Trogdine's economy was based. Back to Chapter 6. The restaurant lurched right. Several patrons screamed. Some clutched their flagons, others their children. Scarlet willed the contents of her stomach to stay put and felt relief when the building finally settled down on a gentle meadow 36 clicks from where they had started. It's obvious what we need, she said, dabbling at a coffee stain on her jodhpurs. Is it so obvious? Said Rune. Obviously, said Dusty, and it was obvious he hadn't been paying attention. Obvious even to the oblivious. Rune ignored him. Well? But before Scarlet could answer, he further interjected. We need an enormous army. He cocked an eyebrow at her. Oh no, she said, hands up. I can't go back to the Primazons. That's a non-starter. No, what you need is a magician, someone who can open portals. Wizarding is illegal, he said. It was an automatic response. Who said wizard? Said Scarlet, and she smiled wide, red lips parting to reveal white, even teeth. Primazon warriors had an excellent dental plan. Rune lost himself in her incisors for a brief moment, then her meaning hit him. Ah, now, Why not? Well, for one thing, I haven't seen her since we broke up. So, it wasn't a nice breakup. Took me fleens to recover, and that was fleens ago. And they say time wounds all heals, Chief. Scarlet picked a bit of lettuce out of her husband's forelock. She's a goddess of the Underworld. She commands an army of female demons. Rune nodded. Yeah, and they're terrifying. Half tree nymph, half succubus. Dusty shuddered. The sucky dryads. Scarlet counted the benefits on her long, slender fingers, recently manicured with crimson ceramic tips. They also had pink bunnies on them. She commands the sucky dryads. They're virtually indestructible. She can open portals through space. Plus, she's kick-ass on base. She's my ex. And we have to travel through all that hell to get to her. Only literally, Chief. Rune enumerated the amount of hell to be traveled. 6 circles, 4 levels, 2 annexes, and at least 1 photomat, not counting the mezzanine. Scarlet's smile got wider, her teeth somehow sharper. And I promise you, we can travel in style. It was settled. Despite Rune's protest, the first side quest was added to the list. There was no denying it. They were now a party. A band, or, in the Flurvish, a Miggins. Their small and intrepid Miggins would travel through some hells to meet Rune's old girlfriend, goddess of death and renewal, of transformation and oblivion, queen of the damned, the cramps and the kinks, Circe Circa. Chapter 7, Circe Circa Exposition. Rune's relationship with Circe Circa was long, complicated, and better explored in later chapters. The short version, he was left for dead in a land unfamiliar to him. Wounded, he was nursed to relative health by 3 horny schoolgirls, Edwina, Meg, and Jo, and their off-putting mistress, Miss Marmee Farnsworth, all of whom made things much, much worse, then pledged his soul to one of the more popular goddesses. Succumbing to his wounds, he descended to hell, and had a splendid fling in the Underworld. Up top, a war raged on, and on. And on. For while Circe Circa was occupied with her new beau, she neglected her soul-gathering duties, briefly. And totally understandably, she was in a new relationship.
It wasn't as if anyone died.
Which, of course, was the problem. The 2 armies hacked and slashed each other for days without end, without ground gained on either side. Undertakers went door to door in desperate search for clientele, to no avail. Avail was the last thing to be had. Without death, war just wasn't any fun. Thus, Rune and Circe were forced to part. Heartbroken, Rune turned to the bottle. Previously, he drank only from mugs. Chapter 8, Illmet. There were still preparations to be made, so while he left the heavy lifting to Scarlet and Dusty, Rune took his jalopy from Vernica and traveled to Illmet. Footnote. Rune's jalopy was a red Maxwell LeBlanc with 16 chrome overholsters and a quadrupline bolonium thruster. He had some stops to make, affairs to order. He'd have to visit his lawyer, a few trusted advisors in the Obscurance front, and, if there was time, he'd stop at the Broken Beast and buy some quality Froedis from Izzy. On second thought, he'd better stop at the Beast first. No sense in speaking to lawyers clear-headed. It was early enough in the day that the Broken Beast had very few patrons. 2 or 3 were sprawled across tables, still passed out from the evening before. Jo and Kate Termaglio cleaned around them. Izzy manned the Froedis booth in the corner and sold Rune an eighth of the finest Mijakojo available, as well as 2 pre-rolls of Reefer Sutherland. The bandstand was empty. The classical fiasco would be playing later that night. Selections from You're a Good Man, Augustus McGillicuddy, from the play by Bill Reardon. Rune was sorry to miss it. The Broken Beast was in Lower Hogarth, a former slum enjoying some revitalization of late. Rune had been born in some stables around back on Wishman Avenue. Lower Hogarth, whether he would admit it or not, would always be his home. His lawyer, a sharp-toothed dragon on 2 legs named Charlatan Chagrin, kept his offices on Illmet proper, upon the upper plateau of Bildungstrom Hill. Hill was a misnomer, as Bildungstrom was nearly a 1,000-click vertical climb. To reach Illmet from Lower Hogarth, one either took the treacherous staircase known as the Ascent. Its opposite on the east end was known as the Descent, and for opposite reasons. Or you hired a balloon basket. Along the way up, you passed the residential area known as Tumbledown, with the homes carved into the cliffside or even lashed to the mountain with great coiled ropes. Illmet, on the upper plateau, was overlooked by the Ruby Tower of High Dudgeon, dwelling of the sect of witches known as the Gesseretti, a squat, uneven block building topped with the rising tower, making most think of a fist giving the rest of Rovo a middle finger salute, which was only obscene in Flurvish-speaking regions, so just about everywhere. Footnote. The primary language of Gilver is Flurvish. In Thessaly, it is Mariquan. Other languages are Okrand, Old and Modern, and Scooberish. Rune had lived in High Dudgeon in his early fleens, and quickly grew aware of his part in a secret plot to overrule the government, to install him as a puppet monarch, to do the Gesserit's bidding. For so much of his life, he'd only known deceit disguised as for his own good. They were a weird bunch, those witches, led by a singular wizened crone named Benny. Together they were Benny and the Gesserits, and he was grateful to be free of them, but High Dudgeon cast a long shadow. On its own, Illmet was a bustling metropolis of merchants, traders, and skulldugerists, all forming what was commonly known as the Kish Market. A cacophony of both colorful tents and permanent structures, aromas and stenches, hawkers hawking their hawks, anything could be had at the Kish Market. Lawyers' Row was on the northern edge, which provided a convenient leap for clients receiving their bills. Charlatan Chagrin was a named partner in the firm of Templeton, Pendleton, Charlatan, and Peck. Charlatan was the only dragon. The other partners were serpents of other varieties. The profession required a certain coldness of the blood, not to mention unhingeable jaws and a propensity for lurking in wagon ruts, all the better to chase ambulances undetected. As far as dragons went, Charlatan Chagrin was unimpressive on first impression, and he liked it that way. He favored silk suits in the loudest colors, especially oranges and tans, anything that contrasted with his natural emerald hue. Once upon a time, Charlatan Chagrin had a full head of glorious viridian hair. His toupee did its best to replicate what once was natural. From that hairpiece hung an oblong head, a scaly mutant watermelon, bisected lengthwise, exposing rows of long, sharp, pearlite teeth. When he smiled, all 187 of the slender daggers gleamed, even in the dark, and Charlatan smiled all the time. Like all other dragons, his main obsession was growing a horde, even at, or rather especially at, the immodest expense of his clients. Unlike most dragons, he stood at a mere 5'7", a stature he claimed made his modest hoard of gold seem all the grander. His legal slogan changed frequently. Currently it was, "Had poison marzipan? Better call Charlatan!" The forced rhyme somehow made it all the more memorable. His offices were ostentatious, even by dragon standards. His desk, for instance, had been crafted from a Volcaire longboat. You would have to hire a carriage to get from one end of his desk to the other by lunchtime, provided you started at breakfast. The entirety of the wall behind his desk was plastered with a collage of the patriotic symbols of Roville, the noble griffin, the virtuous unicorn, the obligatory hip flask, the ostentatious pipe organ, the celebrated kazoo. Swords, shields, olive branches, kittens, severed heads of historical enemies, and other illuminata filled the border. "Great news!" Charlatan said, springing from behind his desk and racing to greet Rune at the door. It only took a couple of minutes to cross the cavernous office. "I'm broke," said Rune. It wasn't a question so much as an anticipation of the verdict. "Better than that," said Charlatan, producing a sheaf of documents seemingly from thin air. "I've been looking over the contracts the Church of B&S sent over, and it's a pretty good deal. So long as I survive the campaign." "There you go again, always looking at the downside. You wake up in the morning and the great burning wood was still there?" "Yes," said Rune. The only way the dragon could have known about that prophecy is if he'd bribed the three sisters, which he likely did, but would lie about. Thus, it would be pointless to confront him. "So there you go, safe as houses." "Whose houses?" "Brick ones," said Charlatan, showing almost all of his teeth in his lecherous smile. "Wolf-proof ones." "Racist. So what are they offering?" "Providing the economy holds, you're looking at netting somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 million sleeves." "That is a nice neighborhood. Now, some of it is contingent on looting the necromancer stores and savaging balls deep for your own purposes." "I thought we were liberating a community." "Semantics. What's the upfront pay?" "Don't ask. Enough to get us there, at least? Provided you send their army ahead to wait for you." "Oi," Rune sighed. "Oi, I thought I was raising an army from scratch." "Oh, that's more good news. The Church of B&S managed to scrounge up some suckers to form a battalion of spiritual warriors. Maybe 2,000 strong. Yes, you know the type. 2,000 idiots willing to die for invisible people. Folks love their gods, buddy." The wolf narrowed his eyes. "No redcaps. Perish the thought." Redcaps are notorious and dangerous zealots, a weaponized faction of the Contrarian political party, the chief antagonists of the Second Cornelian War. We get to them later. "So you recommend I sign?" "Already taken care of." Rune sighed a third time. It was practically his hobby, and flopped into one of the lawyer's opulent red chairs, lined with gilt and pomp and circumstance and filigree. It was pointless to grumble, and he wouldn't have read the contracts anyway. It was the only reason to have a lawyer. A lawyer, it should be noted, who was positively petrified of him, but kept that terror on the inside, hidden safely away behind the greed. "Anyway, I came to update my will." "Again, buddy, enough with the pessimism. The great Bernie Wood, the prophecy. You and I both know how prophecies get started, Rune said, tossing his feet up over one armrest and making sure his boots smudged the finish. Mead, dirty jokes, then a long game of Spurgin whispers. Eventually, some gibberish winds up on a scroll that gets buried for 10,000 fleens, dug up by some narcissistic dope who then decides it's all about him. How many times did Scarlet and I get drunk during the second and plant dumb snee ourselves in some ruin or another? The cons! He threw his hands wide. How much of all of this, he gestured to the room, is thanks to some dumb prophecy or other? Fine, said Charlatan, gradually returning to his seat behind his desk. Who are you leaving what to? And I better find myself in there, bosom chum. At least to the tune of 10%. I can give you 75%, said Rune. Wonderful. Of my dagger. Should take it right to the hilt. Just getting a pen, sir. At the end of the session, Charlatan's mouth hung open, teeth displayed in naked disbelief. You're leaving it all to the staff? I didn't say all, now did I? Did you not get the 25 to be distributed to Dusty and Scarlet's families? I did, and I spelled everything correctly. It's about that last bit, where you leave the castle. The grounds, the woods, the lake, the gazebo, the wine stores, the Lummox stables, your first-generation eye-cally box, and your shares in Palantir flicks. You leave it all in the hands of the Yaga'S. The Yaga'S will see that everything continues to run smoothly, and the staff will never want for anything. He doesn't even have hands, said Charlatan, still marveling at what he'd just transcribed, the words themselves still buzzing within his oral cavities. Your servants' quarters rival small towns, where the staff can live and call their homes forever. But you're basically leaving your macho into a giant ball of fur and teeth. Who better? Greaves doesn't want the additional responsibility, or he's afraid of the Yaga'S, one of the two. Either is just as likely. Look, my main concern is the Yaga'S' height. Mental stability. Rune shrugged. If sanity was a requirement for my staff, I'd be alone in a room accusing myself of madness. Well said, sir, said Charlatan, still appalled at the decision. He made a big display of disgust as he wrote in, shall be controlled in perpetuity by... just do it. The Yaga'S! There, done. Against my sage counsel. I don't care about your spices, said Rune. Now I'm going to assume you have zero interest in accompanying us on this grand adventure. Sorry, senor, but I have a full workload. Clients, dockets, judges to woo, lawyers need to take care of. You know, the Yaga'S is also my accountant, said Rune. He said that just to watch Charlatan's nausea turn him different colors. Naturally, Greaves would still handle the finances. It just wounds me deeply to be so overlooked, said Charlatan, closing the ledger as dramatically as possible. Do you have any idea how small my horde is? Last I heard, it was the size of a studio apartment. Humiliating, said Charlatan. I know a dozen dragons my age sitting on hordes the size of 2 or 3 Squamish fields. Oh, for blur's sake, what do you want? Suddenly alert, and of a sunnier disposition, Charlatan sat bolt upright in his throne. You know the dome of St. Will's Cathedral in Holt? Yeah, it's about 100 clicks high. Tear it off, flip it over, fill that blurger to the brother blurgin rim. You're a credit to your depravity, Chagrin. As he turned to go, Rune heard the dragon say from behind him, and don't you worry, client privilege prevents me from telling your friends you actually care about them. Plus, there's the NDA, said Rune, turning slowly. I never signed a non-disclosure agreement. Near-death agony. Have a safe trip. I'll see you when you get back. There you have it, friends. Rune may be immortal, but he still has bills to pay. His affairs may be in order, but his adventures in Illmet are just beginning. Tune in next week to meet the off-putting Mr. O. You may also learn what Benny and the Jesserettes are up to in Chunk the Fourth. See you next week. Same Rune time, same Rune channel.